Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Crimson Chronicles Podcast. We are in the beginning, or I guess really kind of the middle of the spring, Tommy. The azaleas are blooming, and there's a lot of pollen in the air, and that can only mean one thing. It's getting close to Masters time.
Yes, it is.
So tell us about our guest tonight and our connection to the Masters and what we're going to do for a little bit of a special episode.
Well, it's great to have my friend Cecil Ingram on with us. Cecil's a 81 graduate, University of Alabama Business School. He was a member of the golf team for 4 years, 1978, 79, 80, and 81, and captain for 2 years. He was all SEC for 2 years. He was a member of the 1979 SEC champion University of Alabama golf team. He was a 79 U.S. Amateur semifinalist, the 79 Dixie Section PGA Amateur of the Year, the 1980 State Amateur Champion. And because he had been a U.S. Amateur semifinalist in 1979, Cecil got to play in the 1980 Masters. And that's what we're going to talk about today, among other things. Since 1985, he's been involved in commercial real estate and property management. But Cecil, it's great to see you.
Good to see y'all.
Well, before we get into your once-in-a-lifetime experience playing in the 1980 Masters, how was it to be the son of the incomparable Cecil Hootie Ingram, who was my boss in the athletic department for about 4 to 5 years, 1989 to about 1994? And I know I know Hootie's background and all the places that he coached. And for the listeners who don't realize, even though Hootie was our AD, he had a stellar athletics career. He played at Alabama in the early 50s. He was a high school coach, late 50s, and here at Tuscaloosa County. He was an assistant at Wake Forest. He was a defensive backfield coach at VPI, at Georgia, at Arkansas. And then he was the head coach at Clemson, 1970 to 72. And I know our listeners, viewers don't know this, but under Hootie's guidance, the Clemson Tiger Paw was created. He always talked about that. And then after that, he was with the SEC office for almost a decade. And then he was the Florida State AD for about 8 years, and then became the Alabama AD in 1989. But how was it being Hootie's son, Cecil, with all your moves through those years?
I lived in 7 cities before I got out of high school, probably about 10 houses and 2 sisters. I was the one that was doing all the trash and working in the yard, doing all that. So I had a pretty good bit. Of course, Dad would be on the road recruiting most growing up. Till we got to Birmingham in the SEC office. He had more time and would get to see some golf tournaments and things like that. But we popped around, coaching back then. You coached a few years and moved on. There were no multi-year contracts. You were looking for a job every year. But he was really fortunate. He coached with some great coaches, Jerry Claiborne, Vince Dooley, and Frank Broyles. And then, he followed a line of Alabama folks up in Clemson that's continuing to this day. Unbelievable how many Alabama folks. I was in the area and stopped by to see a buddy of mine, the golf coach at Clemson, and Dabo was doing one of his fundraisers for the Power of Pink and asked me to go over there. I went over and visited him, and I couldn't believe how many Alabama people I saw there. We got around a lot, got to see a lot of places, and still got a few friends. I actually touched base with Chip Tarkenton, who was Fran Tarkenton's nephew, and he lived right behind, one door over and one door back from me in Athens, Georgia. And right in between us was Jim Pyburn's son, who was quarterback Georgia. So we'd have pickup games in the yard, and we'd have a future Georgia quarterback and a past Georgia quarterback. Which is why I got into golf.
Well, Cecil, let's pick up there. And when did you actually pick the game of golf up?
We were going through some stuff when we moved my folks into an apartment, and they found an old picture. I was 2 or 3 years old and had a little plastic golf club in my hand. But I really don't remember playing until we were at Arkansas. And at the club where we were members, instead of going to the pool, I would go to the golf course, and Coach Broyles' wife, Barbara, would volunteer to walk with us younger ones that were too young to be on the course without an adult. She didn't play, but she would walk so we could. And my mother did that some as well. And so I started playing then. In my first tournament there, I played a 6-hole tournament when I was 10 years old.
Wow.
I think I won.
I was going to say, you remember how you finished too, don't you?
I think I had a trophy.
Well, who were some of the folks that were part of your, your formative years in golf? I mean, who were the instructors or the folks that poured into you to help you get your swing?
Well, first, like I said, Barbara would let us get out there so we could play. And then the pro there was big into junior golf. I don't really remember much about him back then, other than if you did something really special, you'd win a club special golf ball. Remember the Titleist back? It was the cheapest ball it was, but it was it was the gold standard for us playing creep balls. And I had when I was in Arkansas, went to South Carolina, and there was a lady in Easley, South Carolina, named Ann Lindsay, who was a very good teacher. It's funny, I'm practicing some things. If I'd listened to her better then, about her deal was turning in a barrel. But my swing, I was always sliding, and I never could get out of that. If I could have mastered that earlier, I might have still been playing golf instead of doing real estate related stuff. She was there, and then I came to Birmingham, and the club we were at had a pro there named Bob Ledbetter, who was a really good teacher and a good player. He just older guy, and he worked a lot with juniors. We turned out a lot of college golfers out of that club for a small club. And then when I wasn't there, I was working for Bo Bowman, who played for my uncle at Tuscaloosa High School, local product, and his two brothers, Gary and Phil, worked out there with him. They would shuttle me to and from my house out to work. He worked with me a little bit on different things, a lot on wedges. And then the rest of my education came from playing the 9-hole course down in Tuscaloosa at Meadowbrook, and the university course where we would play 1 and cut over to 10 and play the flat holes. And most of the time be down there, wherever we were, in summer and in Christmas vacation, I would end up in Tuscaloosa back home with grandparents or uncles, whoever. And my typical foursome down there, which you could see how I became a college star, I would play with my Uncle Pete Pearson and Coach Tom Tarleton and Eddie Conyers. That would be our typical foursome when I was in town. So that's how you go from being a beginning golfer to getting to be on scholarship at Alabama.
Well, that leads me to our next question, Cecil. What drew you to Coach Conrad Railing in the University of Alabama, and what drew him to you? Tell us about the recruiting process.
There wasn't much recruiting process. It was no NIL. It was no one. It's like all of a sudden, looking back, probably Dad kind of handled it, because I think I was actually spent more time in Auburn than I did in Tuscaloosa my last year or so, because at Clemson, one of our coaches was Doug Barfield. His son and I were in the same grade. When they moved to Auburn and we moved to Birmingham, he redshirted. So he had an extra year, but I would go down and watch Gary's Friday night games at Auburn High School, and then I'd be on the sidelines for the Auburn games. Sonny DeGroen, Auburn's coach, never said a word to me about coming to play down there or anything like that until my freshman year when I was at Alabama. And he said, if you could transfer down here, we've got, Bill Bergen and Ricky Smallridge, and we'd really be good. I said, I'm not going down there. The year before me, they'd gotten a guy from Alabama transferred to Auburn. I think it was probably more because of a girlfriend. There's no way I was leaving after I got to Alabama. That's where I wanted to go. I got probably the best offer I got, and I should have taken it, was Marion Military Institute. I would have been playing with 5-star generals and been retired years ago. I've met some guys that have been with, I did a charity benefit with Charlie Boswell up at Andrews Air Force Base, and Fred King, the pro there, had a really good life. And anytime Tip O'Neill or somebody wanted to play, they wanted to play with Fred King.
There you go.
So I might have missed out on that, but when I got the offer, that was really the only one I was.
Well, Cecil, it's interesting you mentioned Ricky Smallridge. Ricky married a Gadsden girl, Amy Shavers, a friend of mine, and Ricky was great to my son when he was at Auburn, as far as giving him lessons and all. He's out at Auburn University Club now and does a great job. Ricky's a good guy. Tell us about that sophomore season, 79, when y'all won the SEC tournament over Florida. Where was it played? What was the format then? I know a lot of the college tournaments go between stroke play and match play. Hootie, your dad was at the SEC office at the time. So how was it to have him as a SEC staff member kind of following you around and probably secretly pulling for Alabama when he really needed to be impartial?
One thing before we get on that, another thing about Ricky, I ran into a kid that I know that's at Auburn now, and he was taking a golf class out at a club, and Ricky was his teacher, and Ricky's still doing it. He's still working with the kids, and he's just doing a great job. He was a people don't ever talk about it, but it's very important who you get paired with in a tournament. You got good pairings and bad pairings. In basketball, you have teams you don't match up with. So it's a little bit, you don't ever hear about that much in golf. There's some people that you never want to play with, and there's some people you love to play with. Ricky was one you would love to play with. But see, when I got to college, they changed. They no longer played matches. You would play tournaments. And back then, we only had 10 teams in the SEC. So you would play tournaments, and there'd be anywhere from 10 to 16 teams there, usually 3-round tournaments. They were moved over. At one time, you would take the total scores from your 3 rounds and take the low 4 of 5 or the low 4 of 6. Pretty much every tournament that I played, I think was 5, sometimes 6 tournaments that scored the low 4 scores each round. So if you shot 85 one day, you can still come back and shoot 75 the next day. You might have a good round. Back when I played, if you shot 75 or better, that's what Coach Rayling wanted to get. If you had a bad day, but you could bring it in at 75, you wouldn't hurt the team. The courses weren't as in as good a shape as they are now. We always tease, they're putting on the greens we putted on were sometimes worse than the tees you tee off on now. We dreamed of cutting the greens to 3/8 of an inch like they did in the U.S. Open, and now they measure it in microns. Of course, conditioning is the same, so that gives you an advantage. But we played the SEC in '79 at Pine Tree Country Club in Birmingham.
Okay.
My dad was running that for the conference. He'd run when I was in high school. I went down when he was running the one at Olympia Spa in Dothan. I went down and I actually snuck in a practice round before the tournament. I ended up playing a few holes with Phil Hancock and Andy Bean, just down there kicking around while they were practicing, warming up. But we played at Pine Tree, and we scored the low 4 or 5 each day. 10 teams there, so only 50 players. And we had Dad needed to get rules officials, and what he did. Also, '79 was the year that the SEC basketball tournament started back up. You'll remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Dad worked out a deal with the golf pros that he knew from me going around playing and where I worked and all that. And he rounded up guys like Bob Barrett from Shoal Creek, Bo Bowman from Inverness, and said, look, if y'all come out here and be the rules officials and rules committee, then I'll get y'all in with a press pass for the SEC basketball tournament. And to this day, those pros always talk to me. So you remember when we got down there on the court side and we get to go in the buffet in with the sports writers, and it was just like that. They had all that there, but more importantly, who was there was it was the last week of the competition for the All Sports Trophy, and Coach Bailey came up, and it was a big deal to win that trophy, and we needed a strong finish, and I think tennis was playing the same weekend we were somewhere, but Bailey came up there, and we got the win, and that helped us win the All Sports Trophy.
Cecil, I saw where some reason the SEC champions were not invited to participate in the NCAA golf tournament that year. Why did that happen?
things were done different back then, and it was committees and politics. And we felt going into the tournament, we had some good tournaments. We were playing better coming in. We really felt if we could finish second or third that we ought to get in there. And then when we beat Florida, who was, one of the best teams in the country at the time. They were really strong. We beat them, and we just assumed we had to be in. And we were just absolutely devastated when we found out the next week that we did not get a spot. You didn't have regionals and all that back then. You went straight to the nationals. It was up at Bermuda Run at Wake Forest that year. We just, we felt like a strong finish would be good. And then when we won, we had no idea that we would not get selected. But at the time, the politics, Coach Railing had turned out a lot of players at Florida, and he just turned out Jerry Pate a few years ago, and Pate was just on fire. Jerry was getting a lot of attention, one, because he was just a great golfer, but two, he just drew attention with, playing an orange ball and diving in, throwing game bang. Just got a lot of attention. My freshman year, I went down there. You're playing tournaments with 5 players in there. My freshman year, first round of qualifying, we played 8 rounds of qualifying, and the top 5 made the first tournament, whether you were senior, freshman, scholarship, walk-on, whatever. We had 126 players tee off that first round, and it kind of whittled down pretty quick. But everybody thought, and we have guys I had teammates from New Jersey, Ohio, Iowa, coming from all over, because they thought, if Conrad could turn Jerry Pate into a U.S. Amateur and U.S. Open champion, that, hey, I need to go there. We had a lot of people come from a lot of places. Tommy, you remember Gary Trevisano? He was co-captain my sophomore year, and he was from Ohio State. He was recruited for quarterback at Ohio State and turned it down for a golf scholarship.
Speaking of that, tell me about that 79 SEC championship team. I know it was you and Steve Hudson and Gary, and who were the other two?
We had that year. We pretty much played. We'd have Trevisano, who was an All-American my freshman year. So it'd be Trevisano. He would always play one. We didn't, we'd do qualifying and all that, but the way we did it, he would play one. And then Barry Harwell was one of our tri-captains. And he would play 2 from Carrollton, Georgia. He played the tour. And then I would play 3. I liked being in the middle. And so we'd have the seniors would tee off last, and I'd be in the middle. And then all year, we're trying to find a 4 and 5 player. Some people would play good in qualifying, wouldn't play good in tournament. They'd have a good round here, and we just struggled around. And then that last tournament, we pulled in one more senior, Kevin Canada, that was from Virginia, and he had his best tournament at Alabama. His last tournament was his best. And Steve Hudson, who had probably his best tournament as well. So we had, now there weren't but 50 players there, but we had Harwell finished tied for 3rd, and I was tied for 5th. And Trevisano and Canada finished 10th, tied for 10th, and Hudson was tied for 18th. And we'd have, different ones. Trevisano had a bad first round and then came back. I think he shot like 78 the first day, and he came back with a 69. But when he was 78, Steve Hudson, Kevin Canada had, a 74, something like that. So, we kind of, we were throwing out scores that, sometimes you throw out a score, somebody shooting, 78, and you having to count a 76. So we were throwing out 74s and 75. So we had a pretty solid team. Everybody was in the match except for Gary's first round. Like I said, then he lit it up the second day.
Well, Cecil, how was it that the team did not get invited, but you were invited to play in the NCAA tournament as an individual?
I think the committee had a little jealousy of Conrad, and they took advantage of, that. Conrad really felt the reason we didn't get invited was because of him, and he felt awful about that, and we felt bad about it. And so when I can't remember, I just remember he called me over. We were over at the old clubhouse over there at the university course, we call it the U-track. And he called me in there and he told us we didn't get that. And he told me that I did get an individual bid. And I said, well, I'm not. He said, well, I understand that. And so we all went home. And then later that evening, he called me over at the house where I was living at Harry's Rubel's house. Let's say 70. And he said, no, what? I'd moved out. I was living. He called me over to his house and told me that he'd had a meeting with Coach Bryant and I would be representing the University of Alabama in the NCAA, and I played well. So I did that. But I had a really good year my sophomore year. I didn't really have any bad tournaments. I was finished pretty high in all of them. I had a good year, even though I probably played better that year than some years that I got higher SEC. I think I might have been second team all SEC that year, and I played better that year than the year I got first team, I thought. So I ended up going up there. Conrad didn't go. He just sent the assistant coach up there with me. I never saw him. I think he might have been interviewing for a job. And I played in the East-West matches, and about the best thing I got out of the deal is I had the Titleist guy. The Titleist had a guy up there that was, their college guy doing this, and he comes around to see me, and he said, what ball do you play? Well, I said, I can play the Titleist. Now, of course, that was the last year that you could play multiple balls in a round. Then they changed it to a one ball rule. But at that tournament, I still, in my bag, I would have a top flight and I would have a big dimple Titleist and small dimple. You get on a par three, you think, well, I hit my one iron with a top flight. It was goodness they changed that rule because it's stuff going around in your head. It was too much. We'd go to Scotland, did the same thing. Plus, you'd have the British size ball. So you'd have the Slasger or Penfold Ace little, and then you have that little bitty top flight. And it was just like, goodness gracious, what to do. But the Titleist guy came up to me and he said, what ball are you? I said, well, I'm playing low trajectory Titleist, whatever. And he said, well, I'll put some balls. I'll put some balls in there. I said, we can't take balls. Of course, the rules. I said, I can't take that. I said, if you want to give me some balls, send them to my coach down at Alabama. And he'll, if I need them, he'll give them to me. If I need them. And lo and behold, it turned out the guy was Wally Uline. And y'all might not know him, but he later became president and CEO of Titleist and Acushnet Worldwide, one of the most powerful men in golf.
Wow.
And when I turned pro, I was on Titleist staff. And when I got my amateur status back, they didn't see me doing much different than I was when I was playing pro. I still wasn't getting in on the weekends. So they kept sending me balls, and I kept my mouth shut. They finally somehow, I can't remember what happened. I don't know if it was Y2K or whatever. It might have been COVID or whatever, and I dropped off the ball list instead of automatically getting it. I remember when I'd move, the big thing about moving that would freak me out is I got to stay on the ball list. They got my address, but they would, I still get it, but I have to call them and ask.
Christmas turkeys and Titleist ball list. You got to make sure they get the forwarding addresses right.
Yep, that's right.
Look, the Titleist ball list is a little more valuable than the Christmas turkey, though, especially these days. So
my wife is always really excited. Jerry Pate's kind and sends me a turkey every year. I'm on his board for the Alabama Golf Charities that runs the Jerry Pate Collegiate. He sends me one of those in Maryland and just always gets excited. Loves you.
Well, Cecil, you mentioned Coach Bryant and talked about his his insistence for you to play in the NCAA tournament. Well, later on that summer, I heard a story that he actually asked you to caddy for him in the Pro-Am for the Danny Thomas Memphis Classic. I think that's home tournament for me. Been out there many a year watching folks, but I wouldn't have gotten to see you that year because the NCAA didn't allow you to be able to do that. As I heard the story, tell us about that.
He did offer me. He offered me to caddy for him in that, and I don't know whether it was Coach Gary White or somebody. They figured out that wasn't allowed. I mean. It wasn't like we were, giving Ozzie a bunch of money and a new car or something. We just let me pay my own way up to Memphis, around. They got a problem with that, So, but let me do that. So he decided, he said, well, I'm going to play in Birmingham with Charlie Boswell tournament. You can caddy for me there. That's where I live. And I met in the group was, of course, Charlie Boswell, who I met, and Larry Stripling, y'all probably heard of.
Yeah, I knew Larry.
And so we had a good weekend there. And then after that, I was recruited. They started recruiting me then for talk about missed opportunities, but I got Jim Martin, the sports writer, said, "Yeah, hey, you need to coach Charlie Boswell because him and Bo Russell, they were getting old, the knees were bad, couldn't bend down. You need to do that." And it took a long time. I didn't do that until that was 79. I didn't actually do that till I'd actually retired in 85, and then I coached Charlie for about the last 8 years or so of his life. Took him to a couple good tournaments on the road, Tallahassee Open, and I introduced him to Vince Gill up in Nashville. The only people on the range hitting balls were Charlie and Vince Gill, and I took Charlie up to the tee and introduced him. I said, "Charlie, you need to meet this guy." And then Vince had another hit come out not long after that. Charlie called me on the phone. He said, "What was the name of that guy that we talked to up in he's a pretty good singer."
Well, for those of you who don't know who Charlie Boswell was, he was actually an Alabama football player in the late 80s. Born in Birmingham, went to Inslee High School, went to Alabama on a football scholarship, was in World War II. And during action, he was attempting to rescue a wounded comrade from a burning tank. And when the tank exploded, it left him permanently blinded. And during his rehab, he took up golf. Placed second at the National Blind Golfing Championships, and he won it the next year. And then he went on to win 16 national championships and 11 international championships over the span of his career. I remember seeing you helping him line up putts, helping him line up drives, talking to him in many of the tournaments. My hat's off to you for that, because he was such a great ambassador for not only the University of Alabama, but the state and the game of golf.
Yeah, you talk about Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus, which one's the greatest one? Most people maybe lean to Nicklaus with 18 majors. Boswell, that's 27 you just named right there. So if you compare, that's the highest level you play. So you realize what a feat that was to win, and many times win when you're supposed to win. That's really hard to do. So he must have been a great. He'd tell me stories all the time about football and riding the train and the Rose Bowl and breaking his nose and all stuff. We had a great time.
Well, Cecil, I would imagine that you probably have a few interesting stories from being on the bag with Coach Bryant. That sounds like that might have been a challenging assignment as a caddy. What was he like to spend time with on the golf course?
He got I'm not really sure how it happened, but when he'd come out to the university course to hit golf balls, Billy Varner would bring him out, but Linda Knowles would call the golf shop, and call me to the clubhouse, and like, what have I done this time? Coach Bryant's coming out. So I'd wait over there, and he'd park. We'd go over there on Conrad's tee, and we'd hit balls. And then one time I was teaching in the golf camp one summer, and Coach Bryant showed up out there. He was getting ready to go on a trip with the Jasper guys and needed a little tune-up. And I was down there with, I guess, about 6 or 8 of the kids from the camp, and I was the youngest teacher. And they've given me every problem child and every poor athlete there was. The worst was the bad news bears before the bad news bears. I'm down on the tee with them, and Coach Bryant walks up, and he tells me he need to hit some. I said, "Well, Coach, I'm in here." I said, "I guess you just get in line with these people." So here are these misfits and ne'er-do-wells and Coach Bryant, and going down the road, worked with everybody. They had these little bitty baskets of balls, and they'd hit them, then they'd have to pick them up. And then I said, "Okay, go pick your balls up." Coach Bryant's picking his basket up, and he's going. I said, "No, Coach, no, that they got him. They got him. His grip or something like that till they got me, hit him again." And so all these kids were going back home. They're going to write their parents. Said, "Yeah, in my group, Coach Bryant's in my group." And their parents, are you serious? You know,
Some of those parents thought they had an A player.
and
You know,
I was almost famous because you'll remember this. You know, on the big weeks, he would leave the Coliseum and come over to the dorm and eat, and then go back to the Coliseum, and just to get everybody's attention. And
Yeah.
one day he comes over there, and it was Monday of Notre Dame week. And of course, the problem was we didn't beat Notre Dame, but if we had, I would have been really famous. But he comes over there, and I was eating real quick, so I had a Monday night class at 6 o'clock. I was first one out line. Well, it kind of gets quiet all of a sudden in there, and you get the hair on your neck start, something's up. Right. And he goes through the line, and I was right there on the first table. You get your tray. And I remember, they said, Coach Bryant, how you want your steak? Yeah, he said, I want that chicken pot pie. And he walked around there, and he comes over to my table, and I'm sitting there by myself. And he said, do you mind if I eat with you? I said, no. I said, I'll get up and leave if you need me to. You can have the table. But he said, no, sit down. We sat down and ate. All those football players that, I got to know some of them. And they're like, look, what's going on? And boy, you should have heard me explain why I was late to class that night. I said, yeah, you're not going to believe this, but yeah, I was eating dinner with Coach Bryant, and I got. They didn't believe that, but I had that gave me a little bit of credibility though around Brown Hall.
pretty good. Well,
Well,
what was he like? Because you obviously being on the bag with him, having other opportunities to be around him, what you had a different view of him as a student athlete that non-football players just didn't get necessarily. So what would you tell folks about him?
I'll tell you two quick stories. At the Boswell tournament, second hole was this long dog leg left par 5. Coach Bryant didn't hit it as far, as he was. I don't know. Tommy, you'll tell me how old I was back then. But Brown's had to be 70 and 78, do the math. But he would, he'd hit 2 good shots, but he still had I figured you needed a 5 or a 6 iron. I said, it's either a 5 or he said, don't get me choice, just too much hit. I said, this 5 iron. He knocked it in there, and he'd gotten up and down on the first hole. And the second hole, he hits this in there, and he almost makes birdie, makes par. He's parred the first 2 holes, and he was at best a bogey golfer. At best, when I say at best, that means with the rollers rules that the group of the gangsters he played with the Indian Hills, their rules. So they get 3 off the first tee and then drop where they wanted it on the first time. And so then on the third hole was a par 3, big old, wasn't a creek, is a river, I guess, right next to it. And he was on the green putting for a birdie. Well, Larry Stripling had hit it down into the river, down the bank, and I crawled down there and got his golf ball and brought it back up, being a good guy. And Coach Bryant 3-putted while I was down there, and he said, don't go get those balls anymore. Just leave. Just stay right here with me. He said, don't get down there. Just leave. And but he would do that. And then later he told me in the practice round, he'd already told me that he was playing. He had a bet with Larry Stripling. He called him Red, and I knew of Stripling, my father, friends, and so I was like, when I was giving yardages to Coach Bryant, I'd give them to everybody. And he told me, he said, I got a bet with old Red. And I said, what's that? He said, if he breaks 80, he wins. I said, well, Coach, he's only 2 or 3 over. He can make that in. He said, yeah, you're gonna have to mess him up. I said, what? I said, well, I can't do that. He said, yeah, you can. And so we got on this one hole, and I talked him into hitting a 9 iron instead of an 8 iron into this hole. He said, I think I need 8. I said, no, it's downhill. It looks that way, but it's really downhill. And he hit it good. And I said, oh, that's fat. And it went in the front bunker, and it took him 2 to get out. And one that got out went over into another trap. And Coach Bryant's over there, hit it again, Red. walked off the exit, patted me on the butt and said, "It's a good job."
That's that's amazing.
Well, Cecil, it is Masters Week, and that's really why we want to hear your journey to the Masters. Tell us about the formal invitation. Of course, you got there as being a semifinalist at the U.S. Amateur the year before in '79. Tell us about the formal invitation. Your first time driving up to the clubhouse as a participant. Did you have any trouble getting in? Did you have to convince people who you were? The reception given to you by the prominent players on the tour, your practice rounds, your first tee time on Thursday, were you nervous? Just tell us about that whole week and experience.
When you get semifinalists back then, now it's finalists, you know the invitation's coming. Of course, you got to wait on it. You're waiting on it. And it's around Christmas. It's one of the best Christmas gifts you'll ever get. And so you get the invitation, and Conrad lined us up to play with the Yates over there, and so I got to take Coach over there with me, and we played a practice round and did that. I went back. I actually got benched. Coach benched me, said wouldn't let me play the week before. We had a tournament, and if I'd have played, we might have won it because I was playing. I went over early, and Jerry Pate could not have been nicer, nor his wife Susie. He got over there, had me over to the house Sunday night. She cooked dinner for us, and he said, "We're going to play tomorrow, just me and you. Get used to it. See the people in there." I'd played, the weekend with the stands up, but no people in there. And so he, kind of walked me around, places not to go, where to position your ball, how to play the strategy. Real good session. And he said, "Look, there are going to be people all over here. Don't worry about it. If you hit it a little bit too far right, it's going to hit somebody. It won't be that bad. Just hit it over there and they'll stop. Then you can chip and putt." But we did that. And he said, "Look, now I got a game tomorrow." He said, "But I'll play with you Wednesday. And I'm getting us a matchup Wednesday." He lined me and Jerry played Arnold Palmer and Calvin Pete.
Really?
When he told me that, I about flipped out. And of course, I called back home. I had a couple of my carload of teammates drove all night. You could do it back then. You drive all night. You pull into the Augusta National parking lot. They just spent the night in the car, what was left of it. And you could pay and get in. You didn't have to get tickets or anything. You could just pay to get into the practice rounds. And so they got in there. And of course, not only did they think they could get in, they thought they could walk inside the rope and get to meet Mr. Palmer and do everything else. I said, "Gosh, y'all kind of stay kind of on the other side of the rope there." But so we had that, but had a caddy, had a local caddy who'd caddied before, and he did a great job. I had one in a practice round. I switched out, and then got this guy, and he caddied for me the whole week. Hit it off well and played well. Just had a one hole got me out of position late, but I'd gotten back to the cut line on the second round and played. In looking back, I made a couple notes of who all was there. I got two guys that I played with that were Walker Cuppers, World Cup team, things like that. And one of them never broke 80, and he lived just up the road, played at Georgia. We played there a lot. He didn't break 80. He's a great player. And another guy's Walker Cupper. He shot 89 the second round, and I hung around with him. I was afraid he was going to commit suicide. He was just beside himself. And like the day before, one day that week, he'd invited me to go eat breakfast with him, and he played at Stanford, and Tom Watson wanted to eat breakfast with me. He said, "Why don't you come eat with us?" So I got to eat with him and Tom Watson.
Wow.
A couple of days later, I said, "Man," it's going to get better. It's a good thing you made that last putt. If you shot 90, you've really been in bad shape.
You took a shot for a few years, 4 or 5 years at professional golf and playing out on the tour. Talk a little bit about your career after you left the amateur ranks, after you graduated from the university. What was it like being out there as a professional golfer?
I tried for about 3 years to get status. I got through the tour school, got to the finals, but back then, if you didn't get in the top 50, you got nothing. There was no Corn Ferry Tour, Ben Hogan Tour is what it was called when it first came out. And I played, they had a TPA tour, and I played every qualifier for those. I got in the tournaments. I think I made the cuts, made the check, but then they realized that, hey, they'd rather see Rod Curl and Homero Blanket shoot 72 than Cecil Ingram shoot 70. So that's when the senior tour got, and they just dropped that. And I'd had enough of the Goosey tour in Orlando, and I'd done a month in San Diego and a month in Phoenix and a month in North Carolina on some tours. And I wasn't going to go overseas. I gave it my 3 years at it, and then I went and got out. I actually was trying to get Hall Thompson to give me a reference letter, and he didn't like the guy that I was getting a reference letter for, and he created a job and hired me. So I got hired for a job that didn't exist, and I wanted to make sure everybody knew I was done playing golf. So during that time, instead of me playing golf, I'd go get Charlie and I would coach him, Charlie Boswell. So that would be my contribution to golf for those years. I think I went probably 15 years before I ever even played in anything. I did play. I played a couple things. I played like the State Open, if it was right here in town, and I played a pro-am down at Fort Rucker that I liked just because I liked playing down there. But I pretty much, quit playing in 84, end of 84.
Cecil, you shot a 74 on the first day of the Masters. I mean, that had to be an incredibly memorable experience to have a round like that. What do you remember about that day, the first tee, just the atmosphere, and are there any shots or any memories that really stick out from that round?
I got off to a good start, but first Raymond Floyd teed off first. He'd won it 2 years before, I think, and he snap hooked it into number 9 fairway, and I kind of hit it off the bottom of the club, and I was in the fairway. I don't know that Raymond spoke to me other than shooting on the first tee. He was a serious kind of guy. He'd get his own. But that's kind of how I played too. So I was happy to,
Yeah.
do that. But I'd hit it on the green with a 6-iron. I had a putt for a birdie, and I thought I'd made it. And right at the end, it went toward Ray's Creek and lipped out. And I'm telling Frank, my caddy, I said, man, we could have been under par at the Masters. I was just like, and he said, well, then I birdied the next 2 holes. And then I had a long wait on the next hole, and I took a divot about that far with a 2-iron. And somebody got it up and down for a par. And then Ray Floyd showed me his club he hit into number 5. I said, well, if he had 5, and I hit 5, I had 5, and that hill rolls back down into no man's land and I 3-putt. I can't believe he did that to me. Well, I birdied the next hole. So I shot an easy 2 under par on the front 9. And I had actually right in front of me, Ben Crenshaw, the greatest putter in the world that we knew of at the time, had missed a putt, and it rolled off the green, and it was about 40 yards, rolled 40 yards down from the front of the green. And he's walking down. I'm asking my caddy, I said, who's that coming this way? He said, that's Ben Crenshaw. I said, what's he coming here to see us for? He said, not the greatest putter in the world, just putted it off the green. We got to keep this one below the hole here. Straight uphill putt that I lagged.
There you go.
I didn't want to hit that top lip. Hit the top lip, and it's gone. It's running down the fairway. So, but had a water hit it. I was hitting it right of the green on 11 and hit it fat, and it went all the way across the fairway into the water. I mean, I was trying to hit it over where later Larry Mize chipped it in from.
Yep.
I'm trying to hit it at the green. I couldn't believe it went in the water. I think I birdied 12 right after. I played the trivia 2 days. The 2 rounds I played at Augusta, I was 2 under par on the par 3s. That's what Conrad Ray told me. You need to really play the par 3 well. So I 1-putted every one. I only hit 2 of the 8 par 3s that I played, but I birdied both. I mean, the others I got all up and down. So that was my game back then. I could chip and putt.
Yeah. That's incredible. Well, you shot 75 second day, right?
Played Leonard Thompson that day, and And one of the things I learned there, Big Leonard hit it a long way. He's blowing it by me. And on the 16th hole, he hit a 7-iron. So I was going, I got to hit it. I got to hit 7-iron good. I want to keep it short of the hole. I hit 7-iron, it goes past the hole. So I learned then that you don't always hit it your full distance every time. You control that distance. Even the big hitters, they didn't let it out all the time. Yeah, I got it back. I birdied 11 and 14 and got back on the cut line, but then I bogeyed 17. I hit it, believe it or not, that back in 1980, they didn't even have trees on 17 except that big Eisenhower tree in the fairway. And I hit it behind, somehow I managed to hit it behind a pine tree on the right side, and I had to punch out that, and I couldn't get it up and down. So that was what got me behind the cut line, and I needed a birdie on the last hole. I didn't get it. But it was like I say, in retrospect, what is it, 45 years later, at least I didn't shoot a couple 80 somethings, and I kept it under 75 and under. And
But you had some pretty good company. I think from some of the research that Tommy did, I think Hale Irwin, Curtis Strange, Lanny Watkins all finished right in the same line with you. And so that's not bad company.
The other thing that hurt, I would have been better off, except Sebi was running away with the tournament. And they have the deal, you got to be at the top 40 in times or within 10 strokes of the leader, but he was lapping the field. I actually played a couple of holes with him. He caught us up in the practice round, played 2 holes, and neither one of them, he speaks Spanish and I speak Southern. We really didn't have a whole lot that we could communicate with. He kept trying to figure out who sponsored me and all that, and he didn't understand about amateur golf. But he certainly was at the top of his game that week.
Yeah,
so I had good. I'd see some people around in the clubhouse locker. I stayed up in the crow's nest with some of the other guys. A lot of good amateurs were there. Hal Sutton, Bobby Clampett, couple other, think who else. Had a lot of the older amateurs, Jay Siegel and Jim Holtgrave, that were kind of the elder statesmen of the amateurs. They treated you wonderful. You'd go down, you'd eat steak and eggs for breakfast, and they'd take that ticket and they'd mark on there amateur $2.50. So
wow.
You stayed. I think staying in the room a night might have been $10, might have been $5. So for like $25, you got a room and all the food you can eat. And then I had a couple people. Jack Nicklaus Jr. was at North Carolina, and he had kind of curly hair like I had. We were both kind of tall, and so people got, they think I would, because I was at a club. They think, oh, that's Jack Jr. Well, I could get some good shirts right now if I could put it on Dad's account.
That's amazing.
That's
man,
wonderful.
That's a who's who.
Yeah.
As you talk about the guys that you had the opportunity. I mean, that amateur group that you were there with is incredible.
I hit balls one day next to Lee Trevino, and he's got his caddy. You had to hit your own balls. He's got his caddy out there with a towel wrapped around his head, and he's one hopping, catching them. And I got Frank, mine's running all over the place. My balls are going everywhere, and I just say, just leave it. I got more. I'd send my golf balls, and my teammates would be giving me balls, so I'd have a good shag bag. I went over there I had 2 full shag bags when I went there, and I came back, I had about 1.
You donated a few.
Yeah, they were just leave them. They're too hard to chase.
Well, Cecil, what are you doing today? Give folks kind of the up to the minute version of what life is like for you.
I worked for Hall Thompson out at Shoal Creek and handled his real estate development, and I've done some of that. At one time, I did the historical restoration of the largest historical tax credit project in the state of Alabama. I held it for record for many years with the John Hand Building downtown Birmingham. I have worked on a bunch of different projects. I've done work for a large REIT. I guess you could say my clients are people that are in the real estate business that don't want to be in the real estate business. They want us to do the real estate part. And then my other clients are people that don't know they're in the real estate business, which is healthcare, which I spend a lot of time with. They don't realize that they're in the real estate business. They own a lot of properties, pay a lot of taxes in some cases, have a lot of maintenance issues, master planning, design. So I do that. I kind of help people with when you get problems that are kind of out of the ordinary. I'm surprised I haven't met Mike Rowe because I've had a lot of dirty jobs. I would have thought I would have crossed paths with him somewhere in the wastewater treatment or the medical waste or tearing down buildings or something. I would have thought I would have seen him somewhere.
It sounds like you took a lot of that creativity and course management and just turned that into a different career, working in property management and being creative in that space.
My best lesson I learned was from Hall Thompson. It was my first job after golf. And he told me something and I kind of checked on it. I checked with the people that were doing it, but turned out that they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And he found it instead of me and told me to go down there and check. And when I went down there, I realized, they didn't do what they were supposed to do. He told me, he said, Cecil, you just learn people do what you inspect, not what you expect. And been kind of my since then, I want to make sure I know what's going on in my projects and be able to look for things and try to find the problems before they hit. And good master plan. Where am I trying to go? What am I trying to do? How am I gonna make 4 on this hole? You know what?
Yeah.
I need to be below the hole in my second shot. So that means I need to be on the left side of the fairway so I can get there. And that means I need to tee off on the right side and hit a draw. So I kind of work the way around. And it's same things. Whatever sport or business. It's have a good strategy for where you're going to be at the end.
Yeah. It's incredible to see the way that comes full circle and those lessons that you learn as a young guy out on the golf course, the way that those things are redeemed over and over and over again in the future. Well, Cecil, thanks so much for being with us. We really appreciate this. It's been fun to take a walk down memory lane with you. It's been fun to think about Augusta National. We're all getting excited and get ready as we get into this week and as we start to think about what's to come with the Masters. Anybody that you want to stick your neck out and say, hey, I think this is my pick for the tournament?
And it's funny when you get near the Masters, some of the guys that hadn't been really playing it, you hadn't been really noticed, started playing. I noticed like Zach Johnson, former Masters champion, he's played well the last few weeks. Angel Cabrera wins the senior tour event this week. Brian Harmon was already in the Masters. He won the tournament today. He's a major winner and all that. So I just think it's amazing how some people they're all gearing for this. Everybody's gearing for it. But I think the odds-on favorites are probably Scotty Scheffler and Rory McIlroy. Those two. And then I hear some other people really high on this Ludwig Ober, Texas Tech from, I guess, Sweden. He's playing. You want people that are playing well and that have got a good history there as well. And then Xander Schauffele hadn't been playing as well as he did last year. People like him, but I think there's a guy that played at Georgia named Sepp Straka.
Mm-hmm.
Man, he's built like Angel Cabrera, and he pounds the ball. Great guy. I've met him a few times, and he might be a dark horse. He might be a dark horse if he gets played. He's played okay, but always my Bama guys. We got Davis Riley, Nick Dunlap, and Justin Thomas are in the field. Justin's had a couple good rounds, but can't seem to get a tournament together. Davis Riley's been playing probably more steady of the three. Bud Colley's not in the field, but he's playing pretty good as well, but he didn't get in the field. So those are I kind of pull for. I'll pull for the Bama guys.
For sure.
It's going to be a little cooler. They're going to get rain tomorrow, which will be Monday. I'll slow it up a little bit. I think they might get a shower. I was sitting there looking at the weather forecast. I talked earlier about the parent makes a difference. Your tee times make a difference. You tend to
absolutely
go early Thursday, you go later Friday, and vice versa. It looks like they might have the rain in there Friday morning. So if you're on the Thursday after, if you're on the Thursday morning, Friday afternoon tee time, you might dodge the rain or something. I've played in tournaments before where I did the rain had come in Thursday afternoon and it'd clear up about noon on Friday, but I was in the late Thursday, early Friday, 36 holes. We figured out at the Southeastern Amateur one time in Columbus, Georgia, that of the guys that played Thursday afternoon and Friday morning, I won the tournament, but everybody else was most of us cut. It rained the whole time, and worst part about it is somebody that shot a good round on Thursday morning. His quote in the paper on Friday morning was, "Yeah, I hope it rains to Friday morning, then clears up at noon when we get out there." And sure enough,
There you go.
we saw that guy. I said, "Man, that's not real nice." So your pairings are good. I think they're playing in threesome. I saw they had about 97 players, so they're going to play threesomes. When I played twosomes. It was a lot more exclusive when I played there. We played.
Well,
Then
it seems like
letting everybody get in.
that's right. That's right. It's like the field in March Madness. They've just continued to increase the field. And
64. Yeah.
everybody gets an invite now, right? Well, it's interesting when you say that, even about the guys that have a shot, because, I remember back in the day, guys like a guy like Mark Calcavecchia, that he might go in the witness protection program for half the season, but he would always show up at the Masters, and they're guys that are just built for that course. And I know a lot of folks are really hoping that this is going to be the Scotty Rory show, and that they're finally going to have the showdown. And a lot of folks are pulling for Rory, just wanting to see him complete the career Grand Slam, and so it's going to be a fun weekend to see.
I'm like you. I really want Rory to win it, and he's playing well, but I think there may be, it gets volatile in there late. So I'm gonna pull for Rory. I think we got a couple rains coming in there. It's cooler, wet weather. That's kind of Ireland type stuff. He'll think it's warm. He thinks it's playing well, so I think that. But my preference is one of my Bama guys winning it. But
absolutely. Absolutely. But can't be mad if Rory pulls it out and completes the career slam. I agree with you.
I think it might be an incredible leaderboard come Sunday. I think you're going to have I think the big names are going to shine this year.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fun. Look, can't wait to watch it and see. And man, like I said, we appreciate the you being with us and joining us on this edition of the Crimson Chronicles podcast. And folks, we thank you for watching. We continue to come back every week and talk about Alabama history and have such incredible guests and great conversations. But none of this would be possible. None of this would be happening if you weren't coming and along for the ride with us. And so we thank you. We ask you, share it on social media. Let folks know about the things we're doing here to preserve Alabama Crimson Tide history all across all of our sports. And so for my co-host, Tommy Ford, who's somewhere off in cyberspace, we'll get him back. We'll go find him wherever he is, and we'll have him right back in the seat he's supposed to be in next week. And we hope you'll join us here again on the Crimson Chronicles podcast. And so as we, Cecil, the way we finish up every episode is the same way. We just give folks a big roll tide. So roll tide.
Roll tide.